All right, time to start Sprint 2. Now, for anyone new, you might want to go back to the YouTube channel, check out the Scrum for One playlist, and that way you can catch up and kind of see how we got to where we are today. But for everyone that's been following along, welcome back. We're about to do sprint planning for Sprint 2, where I'm building an online Scrum class. But before we get to sprint planning, I wanted to share something that came out of my own one-person retrospective that I did at the end of the last sprint. Now, I didn't record that session because it was mostly me just sitting down and thinking about stuff. Maybe I'll find a way to record something like that for the next sprint. But there was one important thing that came out of it that I wanted to share, and that thing is I don't have a definition of done. And that's a pretty core concept in Scrum, and that actually became pretty clear just from some of the feedback that I got at the sprint review. There were things like, the video didn't look that great. There was some choppiness in the video in the early stages, things that I probably would have caught if I would have had a pretty good, or at least a simple definition of done in place. And so I decided to make one. And so I'm just going to kind of share my definition of done very quickly before we get started with sprint planning. So you can see it right over here. Pretty simple. I only have 6 things. I'm probably going to grow this over time, but for now I feel like if I treat this as my definition of done, I take these 6 things into account for every piece of this course that I build, I'll be in a pretty good place. So 6 things, right? I want to make sure that every video has been reviewed for quality, and now I'm a one-person team, so it's not like I can say someone else is going to review it, but at least I need to make sure I spend some time looking at what's been recorded and looking for some specific things, right? Making sure there's no dropped frames, making sure that the audio is clear, just looking for any glaring errors that may exist. So that's the first thing. Another thing I've added here to my definition of done that I didn't consider at the beginning is transcripts, right? I want to make these videos accessible to anyone. And for anyone that may be hard of hearing, I want to provide closed captioning. So I actually don't know how to do that yet. I'm going to have to figure that out as part of the sprint, but I think that's an important part, right? I want everyone to be able to take advantage of this class. Next up, every section. This was based on some feedback at the last sprint review, but I want to make sure that every section of the course has at least some kind of takeaway, whether it's a quiz or an assignment or just something to make it a little more concrete for the students. So I'm going to make sure that that's part of my definition of done. Going to make sure that I have at least some kind of transition statement for each video. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's something that I didn't do. I forgot to do in the overview video that I recorded. So the video just kind of ended abruptly, and that was kind of strange. So I want to make sure I have at least some kind of like, hey, I'll see you in the next video kind of statement in each one of the modules. I'm going to make sure that every video is processed and trimmed. That's like the post-production part of recording these things, making sure there's not a lot of, I guess, what you would call dead air at the beginning or at the end of the video, making sure we clean all those up. And then finally, I think the most important part, making sure that every video that I create is uploaded to Udemy and available for purchase. So this means my definition of done here is really like production now. It's got to be up and people must be able to buy this thing. And the reason for that is I didn't really have much to say at my sprint review last sprint around how this product is doing in the market because it's not for sale yet. I have no idea if anybody's really interested in it. Some folks have been watching these videos here on YouTube and I've been getting some interest that way, but I don't know if anyone's willing to pay for any of this stuff. So I need to get there as quickly as I can. So I'm going to treat that as a definition of done now. Every video that I record goes straight into the course and should be available for purchase. So those are my 6 things. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to review it again at the end of this sprint and see if it's helpful. So let's get on with the planning part of sprint planning. So I had to do a little bit of Jira stuff to make this video work. So I pre-created my sprint. I was having some weird Jira errors that were coming up. So I didn't want to bore everyone with those. So I went and fixed that and got my sprint started here. So I do have a sprint. I had to put an issue in here. Otherwise the Jira wouldn't work for whatever reason. So it's already in there. So jumping the gun a little bit, but that's okay. So sprint 2 of my online learning classes here and set up. And I kind of started off with having a goal in mind, which is right here. Let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger for everybody. I wanted to make, oh, look at that. Jira is being Jira again. My sprint goal has disappeared. Okay, well, at least we can see it on the screen here. we're going to ship a version of the course that would be helpful for new or aspiring Scrum Masters. Okay, that's my goal for this sprint, is to actually ship a version of this course that would be helpful for people that that kind of fit that bill. And this is a little bit different than my previous sprint goal. My previous sprint goal was something like, ship a couple of videos or something like that. And that was great and was helpful, but it didn't really give me any kind of flexibility throughout the sprint. Like I had to get those 2 videos done because that was the goal. And so I wanted to give myself a little bit of wiggle room, but also have something to focus on that's real, valuable, and meaningful. And that's what I think I've got here, right? If I can achieve this goal, if I can ship a small version of this course, and again, have it available for purchase and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to be able to validate whether or not anybody wants this thing, and maybe get some for feedback from real users out there in the wild. So that's my goal for the sprint. I've already started a little bit figuring out what I'm going to do. So this is all from my product backlog. The first one I have here is just the overview video, and Jiro's going to do a weird thing again here. There we go. Based on some feedback from the sprint review, I think I need to make that, I'm going to have to redo that video. Not entirely, but just to make it a little bit easier to understand, a little bit less distracting. There were some specific points of feedback that I got at the sprint review that I thought were good. I want to incorporate that in the course. So things like cleaning up the way the arrows look, maybe having the elements off the screen so that they're not very distracting as people are kind of looking through each section of the visualization, and just some cleanup stuff that I need to do. And I think I can get that done in the sprint. So that's there. But I can probably do a lot more than that, I think, right, in my coming up sprint. So from a capacity standpoint, it's going to be very similar to my previous sprint. Don't have any kind of holidays or any weird things going on in the next couple of weeks. So I should be able to get done just about as much stuff as I did in the previous sprint. And last sprint, I got 3 things done. So I'm looking for somewhere around that, like somewhere between 3, maybe 5 things, because it gets a little bit easier as you kind of work through these that I want to get done in this sprint. And so my goal again is to ship a version of the course that would be helpful for new or aspiring Scrum Masters, which means I need to kind of start at the beginning of this whole Scrum thing. And so the first new video that I'm going to add in this sprint is going to be this one right here. I'm going to do a video about empiricism, those kind of pillars of Scrum, and the Scrum values, which I only touched a little bit on in the overview video. So I want to make sure I cover off empiricism and a little bit of the Scrum values as part of this sprint. I think that's really important for new and aspiring Scrum Masters. Then I need to give a little bit of more detailed content, right? And I had initially thought about just building out content, for example, for all of the accountabilities, do like the Scrum Master, the product owner, the developers, and then move into the events and do all of the events and then do all of the artifacts. But I feel like if I do that, I won't really have anything useful to ship until the very end of this. So I'm going to kind of shuffle things up a little bit. I'm going to try to kind of build out the skeleton of this thing as we go. And I think because my goal is to make this work for Scrum Masters, the first one I'm going to do is a video about the Scrum Master accountability. I think that's important. We need to have some in-depth knowledge about what that is, what that accountability is. So I'm bringing that into my sprint. Now I'm already at 3 things here, which again is how many things I got done last sprint. However, pretty sure I can get a little bit more done this time because this is getting a little bit easier. The video production stuff is a little bit easier. I'm making fewer mistakes as I go through them, so they're not going to take as many takes to get done. So I'm going to add maybe 1 or 2 more here. And if I cover off the Scrum Master accountability, I think the next thing I need is a really good walkthrough of the sprint itself, right? And that'll allow me to at least touch on each of the events. I'm not going to go into depth about sprint planning or anything like that, but by describing the entirety of the sprint, that'll give you an opportunity to kind of impart a little bit of knowledge about each of the events. So I'm going to do a video about the sprint itself. And I need to get started on some of the artifacts, right? So in Scrum, we have 3 artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment itself. And I think the place I want to start with, I think if I had to pick one of those to ship as part of like an introduction course to Scrum, I would probably want to start with the product backlog, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that flows from that. All of your planning and forecasting comes from the product backlog. It helps me touch a little bit on the product owner role, accountability as well. So I'm going to bring that one in to my sprint as well. And so I've got 5 things in my sprint. Again, it's a little bit more than last time, but I'm pretty confident I can get it done. We're going to see, right? We're just 2 weeks away from figuring out if I can actually get all this stuff done. But I do think that if I'm able to complete these 5 items here, I think I can say with confidence that I will have achieved my goal here, right? I'll be able to ship a version of the course that'll be helpful for aspiring and new Scrum Masters. So I think that's it. I think I've covered my bases here for sprint planning. All right, I've got my why, which is my goal. And I think that's very clear. I've got my what, right? These are the 5 things that I need to get done. I didn't really talk too much about the how, though. And in the previous sprint planning, I actually went through each one of the items here in my sprint backlog, and I tasked all of them out up front during sprint planning. And what I found was when I started doing the work on these videos, all of those tasks started to change and they didn't really make a whole lot of sense, especially the ones that I started like later on in the sprint. So I don't want to do that this time because I feel like it would be wasteful. I have a pretty good idea of what I need to do to achieve these, especially for the first one, because this is the first thing I'm going to work on is redoing that overview video. And I've already made an overview video. So I don't think I need to sit here and write out all the tasks. Like I know what I need to do here. I'm going to need to update the script. I'm going to need to update the visual. I'm going to have to record the video, put it through post-production. And then the one new thing I'm going to have to do this sprint is figure out how to add closed captioned or add a transcript to it, because that's part of my definition of done now. That's the only really new thing. So I'm not going to sit here and fight with Jira just to add a whole bunch of subtasks. I'm going to leave it here. I think that's good enough. I think that gives me a good enough plan for how to get this stuff done. So that's it. I think I'm off to the races here. I'm going to make it official in Jira. I'm going to hit the start sprint button. It's going to ask me for some dates. We're starting today. That's correct. We're going to end on a bit of a weird date, but we're going to end on November 11th because I go from Tuesdays to Fridays with my sprints here. That's Remembrance Day up here in Canada, so there's no way I'm going to forget that. And that's it. Let's see if Jira does what it's supposed to do. Looks like it did. So I've got my nice looking sprint backlog here. It looks like my sprint goal has disappeared from Jira, so I'm going to have to figure that out when I'm done recording this video. But otherwise, that's it. So look forward to a daily Scrum coming here. Probably have one of those updated on Friday, and we'll see how far I get between now and then. Thanks for watching.